The 2026 legislative session is right around the corner now, too. Our Capitol Bureau reporter Cody Butler sat down with the cabinet to talk about their priorities. Among them, trying to make sure what happened to 5-year-old Missy Mogul doesn't happen to anyone else.
Chief Financial Officer Blaise Ngolea is auditing local governments across the state, looking for what he deems waste, fraud, and abuse. He's working with his former colleagues in the Senate to make sure the audits are done faster.
67 counties, all the cities across the state are compiling the information that we would need and be readily transmittable to us so that we can do the analysis.
He says this is important because local government budgeting workshops are poorly attended.
It is incumbent upon me, as somebody who is vowed to protect the taxpayer, to take the information and assemble it in a way that it's very easy for local taxpayers to understand.
While Ngolea is about protecting taxpayers, Attorney General James Ethmeyer is going after criminals. He's supporting Missy's law, which would require people convicted of violent crimes to stay in jail while they're awaiting sentencing. This is after 5-year-old Missy Mogul was killed in Tallahassee. Her stepdad is accused of killing her shortly after he was convicted of attempting to meet a minor.
Somebody is found guilty when they've been convicted and they're a violent offender, they should never be allowed back into society.
Ethmeyer also wants to make sure people who use the insanity plea fulfill a full sentence. He's proposing a law that would make it so that guilty by insanity plea would determine where the sentence was served.
Where you have potential insanity or mental defects, it should not absolve you of responsibility and accountability.
Meanwhile, Commissioner of Agriculture Wilton Simpson is about protecting a way of life.
We think about Florida's economy, we don't always think about farming.
Simpson wants the legislature to put more money in the Rural and Family Lands Protection Program.
But as we buy those development rights, we're guaranteeing that we're going to have that space for animals to traverse the state wildlife corridor, right? We're going to make sure that we have aquifer recharge areas, and we're going to have space to grow our food.
The legislature will take up these proposals and hundreds of others when session begins on January 13th. In Tallahassee, I'm Cody Butler reporting.